We continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. We're here in Simin Nun Hey, learning the halachas of Kaddish. We're up to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber in Sif Beis, Im Ischel Loimar Kaddish. One began to say Kaddish, and yesterday in the previous year we learned what were the requirements for that Kaddish. You required to have 10 Jews, males who are Gedalim, non-Avadim, to hear the Kaddish and say Amen. So let's say someone had those requisite peoples there, and he began to say Kaddish, Kedusha, Ba'asara, and then the Yatu Miksasam. Some of them started walking out. Still, says the Mechaber, not such a known halacha. Kaimra say a Kaddish, you're allowed to complete the Kaddish, Isa Kedusha Shischla, the Kedusha that you began. Vusha Nishtayu Ruban. It says the Mechaber, you need to have the Roiv left, you need to have 6 people left. Comments the Rama, Umikol Makoyim, Averi Lot says the Rama, don't run out before you hear this one, no pun intended. Says the Rama, it's an Avera. What are they leaving for? Says Yushalmi. Says upon them that those who forsake Hashem should be destroyed. Avo, but we're just learning, says the Rama. They did the wrong thing by leaving. So let's make up a nice case. Maybe the guy had to run out to Atzalah call. So, but now what do we do now? We don't have 10 Jews. So what do we do now? Is we're allowed to continue saying Kaddish. It says the Ramah, but you're allowed to leave if you're going to leave 10 behind. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Sivkot and Vav, Im Hischel, they began Kaddish. Similarly, anything that needs 10 people, Kigoyim, Nisiyas Kapayim, Kriyas HaTorah, Vav Torah Benavi, Koyim Komash Shechlini, and Zek Kiv Shekvar Yischel Ba'asara. If you began with 10, you're allowed to complete. You don't start the next Indian. Continues Mishnah Berurah, Leimer Kaddish, Sivkot and Zayin, V'mischol Leimer Yishtabach Ba'asara. So now, let's say you began Yishtabach and you had 10 Jews there, and then V'yatzu Miksasan and some of them left. V'chein, and similarly, Mischol Leimer Ashrei, Shkodim Mincha, you began Ashrei. You take account before Mincha, you have 10 Jews, okay, Ashrei, let's begin. Ba'asara, V'yatzu Miksasan, and then a few of them leave. Mistabek Abrim Megadim. The Brim Megadim is unsure. That maybe because you began the Yishtabach, because you began the Ashrei with 10, maybe you can continue and say Kaddish. Why? Because now that we understand that where the Kaddish goes to, so important. It's not, the Kaddish is not in a vacuum. It's not just that you need 10 Jews for the Kaddish. The Kaddish is the bookend of the Yishtabach, as we saw in the previous year, that you shouldn't just say Yishtabach by itself, but rather you always say a few psukim of Yishtabach. You shouldn't say Kaddish by itself. Rather, always say a few psukim of Yishtabach first. Once we know that halacha says B'Brim Megadim, maybe if you began the Yishtabach and the Ashrei with a minion of 10, even if someone leaves, you can continue and say Kaddish. They all say you cannot say Kaddish in this scenario. The Mishnah Berurah does not weigh in Absak Halach over here. As we pointed out, there's no Avol, there's an Umnam in a Mishnah Berurah. It doesn't seem as clear. And it would seem it's not probably the right thing to do, but maybe we could say B'Shas Adchak, there would be a Makav to be Mekel, perhaps as the Brim Megadim is Mistapik. And we continue the Mishnah Berurah of Katan Chas, Oy Kedusha, Lav Dafka, the Mishnah Berurah says this is not precise, I did not feel the Rak Ba'avais. This is even if they left the first bracha of Shemana Esrei, Kol Sef Gimel, meaning it doesn't mean they actually left during Kedusha, as we'll see in the next sif in a moment. Maybe it's teaching us an extra Chedesh. Maybe the Chedesh over here is that even in this case, it's only when you have Roiv, you have the majority left behind. The Kaddish before Baruch Hu, if we're talking about that they left during that Kaddish, you're allowed to complete it by saying the Baruch Hu, the Kula Chad in Yanahu, it's all one Indian. We continue with Mishnah Berurah Sivkot and Yod that teaches us that you're allowed to complete the Kaddish or the Kedusha that you began. Similarly, the entire Shemana Esrei. Before about Goshev Sif Gimel, as we're going to see in a moment. Not only, so this is amazing, you began Chazar Tashatz with a minion, and someone left, you only have 8 people, you're allowed to continue, you're allowed to say Kaddish, Kedusha, and you're allowed to say the Chatzi Kaddish after Shemona Esrei, and even the Kaddish Shalem, that's after that. Why? Because it's all going back on the Shemona Esrei. You even allowed to say Elokeinu, Barucheinu Baracha Mishuleshes. Why? To go Sheischa B'Tfilah Shemona Esrei Gaimra. All parts of Berachas Kehanim in Shemona Esrei, you even allowed to say because it's part of Shemona Esrei. Afal Gap, Titanani Noisek Kaim Bachas Meisara. Even though we know the rule is you can't dochen less than 10, and dochening in the previous year was one of those on the list that you need a minion for. But if you began Shemona Esrei, you're allowed to continue. And even if you began the tefillah with 10, it's davka nesiyas kapayim, actual dochening like they do in Eretz Yisrael daily. We do on Yom Tif, which is another Indian. But the tefillah of dochening that we say in Shemona Esrei, in lieu of dochening that you are allowed to say since you began Shemona Esrei. This is also part of Shemona Esrei. Comments of the Rama, before the Rama. This is the end of the Machaber that says as long as you have roiv left over, says Mishnah Berurah, that's 6. You don't need a recognizable roiv, which is 7. Now says Mishnah Berurah, the Rama came along and the Rama said, but don't make a mistake. You're allowed to continue, but it's an avera to leave. Averi sefkatin yebeis near at least says Mishnah Berurah short saleimer emenu mamten at shigmur is Indian. It's an avera if they don't finish that Indian. Avol mamten shigmur Indian. If they wait until they finish the Indian type, then that's enough. Let's say we have 9 people, so you need to have a 10th guy for Baruch Hu. You call someone in from the outside. He comes in, they say Baruch Hu. Says Mishnah Berurah, he's not mechuyav to stick around for the whole Chazaras Hashatz, shooting acher. It's a different Indian. Ve'im haya iman b'tzrufa beis sheischa Hashatz b'kol ram. If he's there when the Shatz began, the Chazaras Hashatz tzarich lamdan at shigru kol seder kedusha. He has to wait till the end of kedusha. V'kadosh al shachrev v'chein kol kayam, each Indian onto its own. So we're learning a startling din over here. That let's say you don't have a minion, you have 8 people, and you need to say Baruch Hu, you need a minion. You call in 2 Jews from the street, they come in, you say your few psikim of Yishtabach, you say your Kaddish, you say your Baruch Hu. Says Mishnah Berurah, those last 2 Jews, they're not mechuyav to stay. Avad, it's a beautiful thing. But if they were to leave now, they're not included in that which the Ramah said, that it's a detestable and it's a terrible thing, and averi he biyadam to leave. No, they're allowed to leave, and now you'll have your 8 Jews left over, and they're still allowed to say Chazaras Hashatz. But if there's going to be 10 left over, let's say a minion of 20, then someone is yes allowed to leave. Of course, if that person already davened by himself. So let's begin Sif Gimel. They began Shemona Esrei, and then someone leaves. They even finish Kedusha. Says the Ramah. Let's say some of them left after they began the bracha of Yitzhar and Berachas Kriyishma. Lo yasla sheich siver leisbal tefillah kol ram. Should not begin Chazaras Hashatz. Kvar nishtal tefillah Yitzhar, because they already finished that tefillah. If he left after they finished, ukedusha yechol nahashlik will say the kedusha. You can finish the whole kedusha. V'leimer hakadosh shalom shalachara. The shaykh letefillah, because that goes back in Shemona Esrei. She'aymer tiskabel slasain, as we said, that the fact that you say tiskabel slasain in the Kaddish Shalom after Ashiv Elatzion shows us that it's really going back on Shemona Esrei. Aval, however, as we turn over the page for a moment, Ein Kairim Ba'ater Zeu Ninacher. But don't go too crazy. So again, you have the minyan by Shemona Esrei, allows you to say Kaddish, Chatzi Kaddish afterwards, Kaddish Shalom after Ashiv Elatzion, but you can't read in the Torah. Tfilas Arvis v'Kaddish Alacharav lo shayach l'Kriyas Shema. Tfilas Arvis and the Kaddish after has nothing to do with Kriyas Shema Berachai, and therefore having a minyan by the beginning will not help you in that scenario. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Sefkatat Azvav Afilu Kedusha. For then the Gaimer Hashatz called Tfilas Shemona Esrei. The Hashatz could finish Shemona Esrei. V'lo nakin Kedusha lo misham d'lanei doing inacher. We only brought up Kedusha, so you don't say it's a different topic. Lachash Hezchel Sefkatat Hazayin. Nokad Hay Lishna. We said this wording of Lachash Hezchel Afukim Imrash This comes to 2 hours of the Marash teaches. You wanted to be Mekel. Says Mishnah Berurah, the Haskam of the Paiskim is that even if the tefillah belachash, you had 10 people saying Shon Esrei, Dinu shelo yaschel hashatz v'kol ram bevachos me'atara. So this amends a little bit what we saw in the previous if, as we saw over there, that if you're beginning Kaddish and Baruch Hu with a minyan, then you'll be allowed to say, it seemed you could say everything, but over here it says Mishnah Berurah, Psak Halacha, that the Askamas of the Paiskim, according to the Pri Megadim, that you have to have 10 to begin Chazar Sashatz. L'sval Yaitzer Sefkatin Yitzayin Ayin B'Achrein Sheskimu Tafil Lo Amar Rak Kaddish U'Baruch Hu B'Asar. Even if you only said Kaddish and Baruch Hu with 10, V'yatum Miksazim Kodim Jehischel Klal Berchas Yaitzer Mikri Kamosh Jehischel Kvar V'Asara. It's considered as if you started with 10, V'yachon Loitzi Acherim Ad Shemone Esrei Afilu B'Achas Me'Yisara. Again, only until Shemone Esrei. U'Kedusha Sefkatin Yirachas Lav Davka. As we started off the simin, even if you just began Chazar Sashatz, just began the first bracha, so if you begin Chazar Sashatz, halacha lamaisa, you're allowed to go, and now can go all the way through Kaddish Shalom. Sifkatin Yitaz Kaddish Shalom, certainly the Chati Kaddish. So once you begin Chazar Sashatz with a minyan, even if someone leaves, of course, he's not allowed to leave, but even if he does leave, the minyan that's left behind is allowed to say the Chati Kaddish after Shon Esrei, and as well the Kaddish Shalom that is after that. Shalach Res of Kotel Chaf, Avla Kaddish Acher Aleinu Lo Yemer B'Zeh, but not the Kaddish after Aleinu. Filu Mischol Yemer Aleinu B'Asara. And even if you began saying Aleinu with 10 people, V'yatzu Miksasan and something left, Gam Kin Yemer Kaddish De'ino Yela Minog. That Kaddish only Minog Makoshkin the Shir Ayichel the Kaddish Yemer Mizmar Ayacher Alima Desach Davka meaning Rishatz Kaddish. So here we're seeing how important it is to understand the reasoning. Let's just reiterate what we just said. If you start a Chazar Sashatz with a minyan and someone leaves, now you're allowed to say Chati Kaddish after Chazar Sashatz. You're allowed to say Kaddish Shalem after Revolat Tzion. But if you had a minyan at Aleinu and then someone leaves, you can't say the Kaddish after Aleinu. One might think that's crazy, but you just 12 seconds ago you had a minyan. Right. But the Kaddish after Aleinu is only a minhag. It's not going on the Aleinu. It's not one entity. Therefore, you're not allowed to say that Kaddish. Whereas the Chatzi Kaddish and the Kaddish Shalom after Shemon Esrei, that's part of Shemon Esrei from the fact that you said to Kabbalah Slasayim, and therefore if you had a minyan at Shemon Esrei, that allows you to say that Kaddish. Let's finish up. If it happens on a Monday and Thursday, you're not allowed to do Kriyas HaTorah with it less than a minyan. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Let's say you began Ma'ir with 10 people. Or if you rak Baruch L'chud, you got 10 people for Baruch. Some of them left. You should only complete the Kaddish before Shemon Esrei. Again, understanding how important it is to know where the Kaddish and why you're saying the Kaddish. The Kaddish by Ma'ir goes back in the Berachas Kriyishma. So you can say that Kaddish. You can say Shemon Esrei, but you said you cannot say the Kaddish after Shemon Esrei because you don't have a minyan. Because the Shemon Esrei is not connected intrinsically to the brachas of Kriyishma. V'kolshkein say the Kedusha v'Kaddish Motzei Shabbos, certainly not the V'yitin Lacha, the V'hi Nayam and the Yuval Etzion and the Kedusha that you would say, the Kaddish on Motzei Shabbos. Avlim Haya Asar B'Shashes Chulis Ba'al Tefillah Shemon Esrei B'Lachash. A very unfortunately common case. You're davening Ma'ariv and you had a minyan when you began Shemon Esrei and someone left. Again, he was not allowed to leave, but he did. You're allowed to say the Kaddish. That Kaddish shaykh l'tefillah. Why? Because the Kaddish goes back in Shemon Esrei. Motzei Shabbos echol chatzi Kaddish achar tefillah. Become say the Kedusha v'Kaddish Shalom shachar kach. V'fi shekol ze shaykh l'tefillah kamoi b'shachris. We're here seeing here how important it is to understand the workings of davening, not just what we say, when we say, and how we say it, but why we say and where each Kaddish is going back on, and now we can understand that by Ma'ariv, if we had a meeting when we began Shemon Esrei, then you're allowed to say the Kaddish afterwards. On Motzei Shabbos, let us say the Kedusha and the Kaddish. Similarly, at Shachris, if you had a minyan but you started Shemon Esrei, you as well could finish up the Chazar Hashatz and as well the Kadeshim afterwards. We'll pick it up from Sif Dalet in the next year. Amir Tzah Hashem.